Wonderful. Welcome. My name is Brea, and I am the Director of Operations with the Women's Legal Education Action Funds. We are a national charity dedicated to advancing the interests of women and girls through litigation, law reform, and public education. Tonight, actually every October, we come together and we bring together parts of all women activists, believers, feminists from all across Canada to start important conversations and to start and continue dialogue. This year, we're having this important panel, Was This House Built for Us? A conversation with former parliamentarians. Thank you for joining. Thank you for being here, contributing to LEAP, however the path brought you to this organization. I'm excited to share with you the panel we have today. And before we get into that, I have a little bit of housekeeping matters to attend to. First, I would like to acknowledge the land that we're coming from today. This is a digital event with participants and attendees from across the country, from coast to coast to coast. And so we all occupy different Indigenous land, and we all have a different land acknowledgement to offer. Today, I'm coming from Toronto, where historically the land's been called Kakronto. It is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Neutral and Wendat nations. It's important to acknowledge lands, I think, for two important reasons. One of which, it is a practice that is true and important to Indigenous communities, that has been practiced by Indigenous communities well before colonialism. It is a way to acknowledge and thank the land for making our meeting possible. But it's also really important today in the era of colonialism to acknowledge the land, to acknowledge that the history of how we're gathering predates and is long lasted well before colonialism. That this land that we operate on today has had important and long stories and histories and nations that we need to honor. I think when we come from a feminist movement like LEAP does, LEAP is a feminist organization, it's important that when we're acknowledging the land, that we recognize that missing and murdered Indigenous women, the residential schools is undeniably gendered, that the violence of colonialism has disproportionately impacted Indigenous women and girls. So I ask, as we move forward over the next hour and so, that while we're having a conversation, while we're thinking about this panel, while we're reflecting on it, I ask that panelists and participants, we think about how the Indigenous land, its history predates what we often call Canada, or what we call Toronto, or wherever you're from, or wherever you're calling home right now, and think about that work moving forward. More broadly, I'd also really like to thank the people who helped make this event possible. There's two groups that I think are really important that I would like to bring note to. Our justice sponsors, Delaney Capital and the Bank of Montreal, BMO, as well as our partner sponsors, the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, Koski Minsky LLP, the Borden Ladner Gervais LLPs driven by Women Institute Initiative, the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, and the Association of Management Administration Professional Crown Employees of Ontario. Their sponsorship and support have helped make this panel possible and help make LEAP's work possible. It's really a powerful stuff. For some more housekeeping items, we are closed captioning this event. It's really important for us to make sure our events are as accessible as possible. So if you look down at the bottom of your screen, you'll find a closed captioning button, CC, as well as a French translation. If you require French interpretation, please look down and please use it. We are offering this panel in both official languages because LEAP is a national organization dedicated to working in both official languages. This panel has been made possible with our wonderful moderator, Robyn Doolittle. Robyn Doolittle is a Globe and Mail investigative journalist and a two-time winner of Canada's Michener Award. She has probed how police mishandle sexual assault cases, shady business deals, political corruption, and Canada's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Her latest series, The Power Gap, has examined gender imbalances in the modern workforce. I ask you all to welcome Robyn Doolittle to this panel. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm so delighted to be here. When I got this invite, it was probably the best panel I've ever been invited to moderate. So very excited. I do seem to be having some weird feedback situations. So what's going to happen if things go south? I'm going to bail out and come right back. And we're all just going to keep rolling. So that is the contingency plan. But let's roll ahead for now because it seems fine. I'm seeing nods. All right, getting right into it. I'm reading some bios here. Celina Caesar-Chavannes is a business consultant, coach, and international speaker. She currently serves as the Senior Advisor, EDI Initiatives, and Adjunct Lecturer at Queen's University. And her memoir, Can You Hear Me Now? Hold that up. Let's see it. Was published by Penguin Random House on February 2nd, 2021. She was the former member of Parliament for Whitby, Parliamentary Secretary to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and Parliamentary Secretary for International Development. Celina, I'm so excited you're here. I can't wait to talk to you. Jody Wilson-Raybould served as the independent member of Parliament for Vancouver-Grenville, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, the Minister of Veterans Affairs, and the Associate Minister of National Defense until her resignation in 2019 following the SNC-Lavalin affair. She's also a very recent published author. Do you have your book sitting there? Let's hold that one up. Indian in the Cabinet. Get it up. Get it up. Make some orders happen here, folks. Jody is a lawyer, an advocate, and a leader in British Columbia's First Nations. She has been a provincial crown prosecutor, a counselor for the Weewakai Nation, a chair of the First Nations Finance Authority, and has served as a regional chief of the BC Assembly of First Nations. And last but not least, Lisa Raitt was elected into the House of Commons in 2008, where she held on to 3 senior portfolios, serving as Minister of Natural Resources, Minister of Labrador, and Minister of Transport. Ms. Raitt was the deputy leader of the official opposition of the Conservative Party of Canada. Most recently, she joined CIBC Capital Markets in January 2020. She holds a Bachelor of Science from St. Francis Xavier, a master's in chemistry from the University of Guelph. She's also a lawyer, was called to the bar in 1998, and apparently is also a comedic champion. Let's hold that up right here, guys. This is like... Yeah. This is going to be good here. We have a real array. Okay, I want to dive right into it, and we'll go in the order that I introduced you to start. Politics is a messy business, and I think everyone knows it's a messy business. I think everyone all of you had your eyes open to an extent of what you were walking into and what politics is. But it wasn't, even when you were prepared that you were going to walk into a kind of what that forum is, it took you by surprise in some ways. And I wonder if you can kind of speak to that, of what did you think a career in politics was going to look like versus what it ended up being?
Oh, wow. So thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you to Lee for having me. I'm speaking to you from my home in Whitby, which is the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island, Williams Treaty Territory. And I want to give thanks to the ancestors across Turtle Island and African ancestors who line the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Thank you all who are participating for being here tonight. You know, this question is so interesting to answer because the expectation I had going in was add women, change politics, and diversity is our strength, which to me meant intersectional feminism, and that we were going to be looking at all feminist policy through an intersectional lens. And I was like, yes, this is what I could actually do, because we're going to be looking at equity. We were going to do some radical, bold, transformative things. And then we got a majority government. I was like, well, not only did we say we were going to do it in a platform, we could actually do it. And there were a few things that were really disappointing. And I think for me, I was shocked by how, even when you walk into the space, the infrastructure of the space, and how blatant it was that there was no representation that people of African descent had ever contributed to the social, economic, or political climate in Canada. Like, there was just nothing there that represented me. And so I would find that when I was walking down the halls that I'd, look at the picture of Kim Campbell and be like, hey, Kim, how's it hanging? Because it was like, she was a woman and I could identify with at least that. And I could say, how's it hanging? And, have some kind of connection to the infrastructure. And then with the actual messiness of the business, it was really disappointing that add women, change politics, and diversity is our strength did not equal intersectional feminism. And the things that we promised were not delivered upon, especially when it came to equity. And if I could address just at the end of this, the messiness, the messy business of politics, I think we should rethink or reframe how we talk about politics as being a blood sport or messy, because in their laser cut suits, nobody's getting messy, okay? There just isn't the political will to do some of the things that really needs to happen for the most vulnerable in Canada. And we should push for that accountability to make sure that that happens. So I think it's less about messy and more about the unwillingness to do the hard work and to actually get those suits in the mud and grease on the elbows.
Do you think it's possible for politics not to be messy?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, Jody.
No.
I don't know.
A quick follow-up for Celina and then to Jody. Sorry, just like really quick, but it sounds like you think this idea that politics is inherently going to be messy and complicated is actually a false idea.
I think it could be, it should be, when we're looking to enact legislation that's going to impact millions of people, the empathy that is required to do that should not make it messy. It should be a collaborative. It should be something that we're thinking about. How do we use this responsibility, use this opportunity to serve in the best interests of Canadians, to use a framework of servant leadership where we're looking at empathy, good listening, doing what is right for the people, always putting the people ahead of our own personal interests. And if we are doing that, then it shouldn't be messy. It should be one in which we love what we do because we're serving people and not serving our own personal interests.
Jody. Same
Sorry,
question. You when you got into no, that's okay. Sorry. When you got into politics, what did you think you were getting into? What was it actually like?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm in my home community and Wewakai and Kwakwaka'wakw territory. I'm really pleased to be able to spend a little bit more time now in my home community. And I'm really grateful again to join this wonderful organization to have this discussion, another discussion. I mean, politics is important. Being a member of parliament is important. Putting yourself out there to run for elected leadership and as Celina talks about, following a path of service, that is incredibly important. And that path of service or giving back to community, using your skills and abilities, whatever they are, to ultimately improve quality of life was how I was raised in this community my entire life. I was an elected regional chief for almost 7 years in the Indigenous world of politics, which is very different from the world of politics in Ottawa. I found, but my eyes were wide open to the reality of politics, of partisanship, of political parties to a certain degree, although I was never a member of one until I joined Justin Trudeau's Liberals back in 2015. You opened up by saying a career in politics. I mean, I actually don't view being an MP as a career. Many people do view it as being a career. I got involved in politics because there were certain things, goals I wanted to contribute towards achieving, certainly around true reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, looking at the criminal justice system, looking at the very nature of our democracy and whether or not we're functioning and governing well. Those are the issues that brought me into politics that I wanted to contribute my skills and abilities towards. What I found that I didn't realize existed to the degree that it does was the absolute hyper partisan nature that exists within those walls. And that place obviously wasn't built for us. We weren't even considered people when that place was built. And there's a dress code, as Celina talks about, that the guys have to wear suits when we go in there, and it doesn't even account for anybody else in that place. But I found that it was very unlike where the worldview that I hold, which is very integrative, which is very fundamentally interconnected, individuals within a community, with the natural world, and the importance of working together, of tackling big issues based on our collective strength. And diversity wasn't something that was embraced. And for me, it was very foreign in terms of actually tackling the real issues that we have before us.
So that partisanship, like, is that something that can be overcome? I guess to kind of build off of the question that I asked Celina, this idea of politics, politics is what it is. I think a lot of people feel, and is there a way to change it that's actually possible?
Well, absolutely there is. I mean, I've always been a cup half full person, and I believe, and one of the reasons why I wanted to write about my experience is because I believe it's in all of our power to speak up, to speak about our experiences, how we retreated, the challenges that we faced, and the reality of not having members of parliament there representing their constituents, but having many MPs simply representing what unelected people in the Prime Minister's office want, or what their leader wants. This wrong way for democracy to unfold. And I'm incredibly proud to have been the MP for Vancouver Granville, and incredibly proud that the constituents of Vancouver Granville elected the first ever female independent member of parliament in our country's history. That means that things can change, that politics can be done differently, and we should never be satisfied with the status quo. Simply because things are the way that they are doesn't mean that they have to remain the way that they are.
Lisa, same question for you. I mean, what did you think getting into politics? What did you find when you were there?
Is it what I expected is the good question. And I'm in a great position where I can build off of what Celina and Jody have said, because I completely agree with them. Much like what we've already heard, I saw partisan politics in my life when I was working at the Toronto Port Authority. The board of directors was politically appointed. There were Liberals, Conservatives, NDP on it. But when push came to shove, they'd put their sniping aside and do what was right for the corporation. And that didn't happen in Parliament. They entrenched. It was never apologize, never retreat, never explain, never go to the other side and try to work things out to get it together. I don't know when that change happened or if it did happen, but that was the biggest surprise for me, that I couldn't walk across the aisle and go ask Bob Rae for some help in dealing with a labor issue, because I would be viewed as being weak and letting the Liberals score a point. And I don't think that's what I signed up for. And I know that's not what I signed up for. I stuck around for a long time though. So, you can all give me raps on the hand for that. I honestly thought that the work was important. And I know, Jody, I've heard you talk about the work before. Being a minister is rarefied air, and it's an incredible honor and privilege, and you have the ability to do great things. And Jody, you did great things on a big scale. I, on the other hand, made sure that you can use your cell phone on a plane. That's my contribution as Minister of Transport. You're allowed to hold your phone when you take off and land. And I wish I was joking about that. But, everybody has things within their portfolios that are not partisan and not part of politics that you can be really, really proud of. And Celina, you guys changed it. You did make it better when you all came in 2015. I can see the change. Whether or not they continue in that path, I don't know, but you made an impact. And I'm so proud of you for what you guys did. And I'm proud that we were all friends when we were there.
I am too. It's amazing.
Wait, let's talk about that, because just getting to know you guys really, really briefly in some of the pre-calls here. You guys are friends, but you're conservative and you're, well, kind of, you're liberals, former liberals, sort of liberals. Like, let's talk about that. Can you be friends with people on different sides of the aisle? How do you be friends with people on different sides of the political aisle? Because it seems to me that would go a long way to breaking down some of the partisanship.
It should be the norm, not the exception. That's what upsets
But, like,
me.
so how do you, was that the norm that you saw when you were, it didn't seem to me like I don't know, what is it like in the house?
So it's an interesting, Lisa, you bring that up, and it went through my mind. Why can't I just go over and say to Michelle Rempel, who the one constant in my life in all of the stuff that I went through there was Michelle Rempel. And we desperately disagree on some of our policy, and we could disagree on policy. But when I would receive a text or a message or a look at the bar, like, are you okay? It made me really sad after I left that I didn't have the courage to just say, forget it, I'm going to go over and give her a hug, because she saw me. And the one thing that I felt was really missing, and you heard it in Mumalaka Gak's exit speech, is when people don't see you, when you are transparent. And so even within your own side, you're trying to fight for things, you're trying to do things, but you're talking about things that are really important. And Michelle would like send me a note and say, keep doing it. And I'd say, like, I don't want to be the angry Black woman. I don't want to be that. And she's like, but you're a woman and you're Black and you're angry, so they're going to talk about you anyways. Who cares? And I just wish I had the courage to just say, I'm going to forget the unwritten rules or the written rules. I don't even know where these rules come from. This place wasn't made for me. I don't know where the rules are. And just go over and say, thank you for being amazing.
Yeah, I have to say, just on the friendship reality, I mean, it was very different. I'll admit it was very different when I was sitting on the front benches and I was a minister. You don't have very much time to engage and to socialize. Not really like that, in groups or going to receptions, but you didn't have a lot of time. When I became an independent, I found there were so many people right across party lines that were reaching out. I mean, Celina and I sat in the very back corner for a while there, but people from all parties came up, offered us their spots on committee, offered us speaking slots in the House of Commons, and that's important. More importantly than that, shared with us what the issues were that were important in their ridings and asked to collaborate. And that was fantastic. I mean, I know that I'm going to visit you, Lisa, whenever I get out there, which is very soon. And I think I'm going to see Celina next week. And I have made so many friends that I know I'll have for the rest of my life. There's one story. I was sitting in the front bench and I was listening to Thomas Mulcair give his last speech in the House of Commons. And it was, I mean, any service, however long or however short, is important. And it was emotional for him and for everybody that was listening. I think I wrote him a note, and there was an MP that was sitting beside me who will remain nameless. And she was looking at my note, and I was just saying, thank you for your service. It's fantastic. Send it over. And this person said, why would you write that note to that person? He's in the NDP. And I'm like, because he's this extraordinary man that has given himself to public service. It's just that nature of dynamic is just so bizarre, but it's very prevalent, I found.
I talk to Tom Mulcair at least once every 2 weeks now.
On your commentary?
No,
or just as friends?
We're friends. I'm friends with his wife. It's one of those really bizarre things, but it came out of the same type of thing. I ran into his wife in the washroom, in the ladies' washroom at a big event that we were at, and we struck up a really great conversation, and she kind of paved the way for me and Tom to get along, and then he went through his troubles with his party. But yeah, I've been friends with him for a long time.
If you guys at home are going, like, what does this have to do with whether the house is built? For me, like, to me, this is relevant because it's speaking about these old ways of doing things and how things have to be that are not conducive to going, maybe it doesn't have to be this way, that is more, maybe I would say, toxic in some ways. And I think for sure the media has a huge role in the partisanship that occurs. I mean, Kim Campbell, I'm going to butcher her quote, I should have Googled it before, but that famously said that elections are not a great time for discuss serious issues, I think is and like, what a depressing idea, but there is an element of truth to that. And I'm wondering if you guys can each quickly speak to, before we get to the real like meat of this, what we're talking about here today, this idea that in the political world, it's hard to come out and say, oh, I'm sorry, this didn't go right, or to have that kind of honest discussion with the electorate because of the climate. Or maybe you disagree with me. Discuss. Let's go with Lisa. Lisa first.
Well, I have learned in experience that regardless of the advice you're receiving from the Prime Minister's office, apologizing and dealing with something in the moment is the best thing you could possibly do. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, they will want you to say nothing. They will want you to shut it down. They will want you to go and hide yourself in the basement so no one can get you on tape or on camera. But honestly, my best advice is just face the camera, say the mea culpa, and ask for forgiveness. And if you can't get forgiveness because what you've said or done is atrocious, then you got to live with what you've done. But you can't hide.
What do you think? I mean, is it practically in the real world, is it possible for politicians to do this?
Just to apologize,
Or just to like
speak the
own up, to talk
truth?
about mistakes, to speak about things are so rarely black and white. There's gray, to really get into that with the public, the gray, the serious stuff that, yeah.
Yeah, I think that we do not give Canadians the credit that they deserve. And I mean, everyone is human and everyone makes mistakes. And if you make one, have the ability to be self-aware enough to actually go and own that mistake. And as Lisa said, I agree with if it's really atrocious, then you'll suffer other consequences, I suspect. Yeah. But it's the same on, I talk about red meat issues, or I learned this term when I became a minister. These are issues that you don't want to tackle because they're not politically expedient. You might lose votes. I believe the same is true in terms of apologies or when you make mistakes. If you have real conversations about these important issues and explain the rationale, it's like medical assistance in dying. I think everybody was disappointed with what Jane and I did on that to a certain degree, but we felt we found the balance, explaining rationale in terms of what you're doing, and let Canadians decide. They may not like what you've done, but they will respect you for telling them the truth, the evidence you're basing decisions upon, and why you're doing it, not simply because the polls say that it's the right thing to do.
Celina, can you win elections doing behaving that way?
Of course. Again, I think we're following a rule book that nobody on this screen was ever contributed to. So we're following a rule book that was existed for a certain period at a certain time, and it has evolved. Our democracy has changed, and again, I'm going to go back to this conversation around empathy. If we cannot look at the person sitting beside us and say, look, I harmed you, I did something wrong to you, I'm sorry. How does that translate into policy that impacts millions of people? We really have to think about our capacity for compassion, for trust, for empathy, for all of these attributes that are considered soft, but actually weave themselves into the tangible results of our policy and how they impact people who need us to develop policy that will provide a safety net for them. And if we cannot do that for each other, can Canadians actually trust that we could do it for them? This is why we have to push to do things differently. This is why we have to say, look, I am sorry, I did something wrong, or I'm going to have the hard conversation about medical assistance and diet, or I'm going to have the hard conversation about race. You know why? Because at the water coolers on Monday, people talk about the sports games and loud voices and the movie they saw last night, but they're also whispering about the sexual assault and the racism and the things that are the mental health issues that they have. And if we're not willing to talk about it and amplify it in that platform, then why are we there? Does representation actually matter?
Mm-hmm. And let's get to it right there. Let's talk about racism and sexism when it comes to being a politician in this country and being a member of a party. Jody, we'll go to you first. This question was this house. I'm going to say the house was not built for you, and can it be built? Can it be a place that you or someone like you will be welcome, and will it be functioning? Will it not be miserable?
Well, yes, and I do not want to let my experience and my not running again, never say never. I mean, we never know what's going to happen in the future, but I don't want that experience or my telling my lived experience as an MP and as a minister to deter anyone, particularly those marginalized people that don't see themselves in this space, women, from putting their names forward and running for office. There's so much that we need to do collectively to assist people that don't necessarily see that path for themselves, and to encourage and create the space for them to achieve and be elected into office. There's a lot of things that we can do. There's a lot of things that leaders of political parties can do. But, you know, I came in as a proud Indigenous woman from the west coast of British Columbia. I left as a proud Indigenous woman from the west coast of British Columbia. In the span of 6 years that I spent in federal politics, I learned a great deal. We have come a long way. When I left Parliament, there was 100 women in the House of Commons, and that is important. But there needs to be more. So we have a long way to go. Simply because I was an Indigenous person in the caucus at one particular period of time, you would think, and all the diversity, Celina and others that are in that caucus, the reason why we were there was because of our lived experience, our different ideas, our expertise on certain issues. And that's important to have that diversity. But if you don't listen to those voices, which is the experience that I had as an MP and certainly as a minister who had not blowing my, I'm with expertise in a lot of different areas, I wasn't listened to. So it doesn't matter what table you sit around with, what level of power and authority, the experience of marginalization on gendered and racialized terms carries with you, with people. It's alive and well, and we need to talk about it. We need to move through it.
What does that actually look like? And I want to be clear, I'm not just talking about SNC-Lavalin here, actually. The idea of not being listened to, like tangibly, what is that? You're at a table, you're debating ideas, you put your hand up, they're like, not like, what is that actually? How does that play out?
Number of quick ways. I sat around a cabinet table where one cabinet minister said to me, "You're the first Indigenous person I've ever met in my entire life," to another saying, "You're a national treasure and we need to protect you," to saying, "Oh no, we know what's best," like literally saying that in terms of Indigenous peoples and reconciliation. Or, and I know as women, we've all probably faced this to a certain degree, ideas that I was putting forward weren't actually listened to until a man said them. That was the reality.
I was just writing that down, Jody. That's exactly it. Until the guy said it, the idea didn't stick.
Yeah.
Can I just quickly, and then I'll move on here, but when someone says something to you like, we know what's best, I'm sure in your mind, you're like, your head is exploding. Is it, practically speaking, in that moment, can you speak up to say that's not okay? Or like making the calculations of how is this going to impact the dynamics of this meeting, my future relationships? Like, can you talk to me about being in that position when you know you're not being listened to, that you're being treated as an outsider, and making those calculations of how to proceed?
I wouldn't say that I made any calculations. I was put in that role and elected for a reason, and hold values and beliefs and have been an advocate for issues my entire life. And when people say those things to me, it empowers me even more. I use a word in my book and it's relentless. I am relentless in trying to achieve the things that I put myself out there in terms of public service to achieve. And I think many people do. So when faced in those situations, you need to make sure in speaking up that you are safe to do so, certainly. But sitting around a cabinet table or whatever table it was where my voice was discounted made me want to speak up even more.
I would say, Robyn, sorry, I would say that, to the question of calculations, I did have to make calculations. I had to decide, knowing that this space wasn't built for me, knowing the power that certain people had around the room that could influence my life. I had to decide, I had to make the choice whether I was going to continue to speak up about mental health or race or anything that I was talking about. Do I, one, become the model minority and be quiet and sit and be pretty and not ruffle any feathers, in which I lose part of myself? So either way, I'm going to lose part of my identity, lose the fire in me. Or do I disrupt and continue to speak because I know that representation matters and I need to speak up for things that are representative of my intersecting identities? And that calculation was, I actually thought, if I continue to do this, I may never work another day in Canada again. If I know I'm going to speak up for Jody or to send this tweet, I may never work another day in this country again. That is a huge consideration when you think about the fact that women with intersecting identities tend to, when they do speak up, get the short end of the stick, get fired, get removed, get demoted, get all kinds of things happening. And truth be told, from October of 2019, after that election, till October of 2020, I did not work. I sent out 1 million different resumes. I could not find a job. The only reason I'm at Queen's right now is because there's an ally who was actually a co-conspirator, who was a real G, and her name is Jane Philpott. And she actually understands what allyship means. So not valuing my identity-related experience, expertise, and knowledge comes at a cost, not just to an institution, but if I'm not able to use that there, how is that place built for me? And so to answer that question very quickly, my advice to people is to understand the value that is inherent in that identity-related expertise, experience, and knowledge, and leverage that for policy, leverage that for service delivery or product development or whatever you're doing. And understand that that could only be achieved if you run in packs, but be your most authentic self while you are there, because they're going to talk about you anyway.
There.
You might as well give them something good to talk about.
Celina, what did that look like for you when you were in those meetings, like in the earlier days, where you are noticing that this place is not built for you?
That was a sad reality. That was chapter 10 of my book, which I'm always embarrassed about. And I actually wanted to tear the entire chapter out, because it's like, you understand what racism looked like, you understand what tokenism looked like, but they said that they wanted to add women and change politics and that diversity was their strength. So it can't possibly be happening, but it is happening, Celina, because you're only being invited to Black events. But no, it's not really happening. Come on, Celina. I mean, come on, get thicker skin. What are you doing? This is like the job of a lifetime. Why don't you just sit back and just relax? But no, Celina, this is actually, and this is the insidiousness of discrimination, where it plays in the little crevices of your mind. So you believe that you are actually the one at fault. You sit and beat yourself up and say, oh my God, if only I just shut up, if only I just was quiet, if only I didn't comment about X, Y, or Z. It looks like when they say, show me crazy. Because you actually are like, am I actually crazy? You doubt yourself. That imposter syndrome creeps in. And if you are not strong enough to overcome it, and maybe I'm not, I just felt like you have no choice but to say, no, I'm done with this role as parliamentary secretary. I don't care what kind of perks it brings, because this is nonsense. And
Well,
it's tough.
is it one person's job to overcome that by themselves? Probably not. But Lisa, you were in Parliament for how many years?
Too many,
10?
12 years.
You've
12
seen
years.
some stuff. You've seen some stuff. What was your experience being a woman, a conservative woman minister?
So I could listen to Jody and Celina all night, and I almost want to yield my floor to them. But I want to tell you, let me tell you where I've landed after the experience. I never experienced racialization. I did experience sexism for sure. But you know, I'm at a large employer now that values training, that values having leaders know what's going on. I just finished about 20 hours in an inclusivity course. And I learned about microaggressions, and I learned about my own biases, and I know what my biases are now, and I recognize them, and I know about my privilege, and I see how it manifests itself, and I'm aware of it, and I can go to the balcony and understand what's going on and try to make people feel comfortable. Where the hell was all this training when I was dealing as a member of Parliament with 337 other really unique individuals? And why is it always that training like this, which is so beneficial, is always seen as a punishment? Oh, we've had some harassment happening in Parliament. Oh, everyone's going to have to get trained on sexual harassment. Like it's a punishment. It's not a punishment. I mean, I really think that if we want to change the House, that we really have to take a hard look at turning these people elected into leaders and treating them as if they are such, and giving them training in a really open and kind and purposeful way that's going to help them understand what's going on, as opposed to say, you know, oh, we have a racism problem, therefore we're all going to get trained on being anti-racist. That's not going to work. We've got to do better on it, because my eyes, you know, I'm wide open, and I'm just going to try to do better every day.
So what
I didn't have it when I was there. I didn't.
Can you talk to me though, when you were there, what is the stuff that someone who's sitting here listening to this, thinking about going into politics, should be aware of what they might face?
Sure. I mean, I was called kiddo all the time. I was called dear, honey. I mean, you think that doesn't happen. It still happens. I mean, Celina, I don't know if you and Jody had it. There's a couple of handsy people. There's always handsy people in the room. You know, you're young, you're a woman. I'm recently divorced. Of course, I'm going to accept any kind of male attention that comes my way. Not. So that stuff kind of happened. I think what worried me more was watching my younger female staffers get harassed. I didn't like that. You know, I once had a couple of them over to my condo, and I just said to them, he doesn't love you, and he has a wife at home. So stop being infatuated with them. You're being used. And that happens over and over again on the Hill. And I don't know if it's still happening, guys, to be honest, but it certainly did happen in my time there. And it kind of is soul crushing, because then women are just looked on as appendages within the system, as opposed to being clear. I mean, eventually you get old enough, you age out of getting the attention. But then at that point in time, you're a menopausal freak and you don't know what's going on. So you just transition into something else. And the other, I would just like to, Robyn, and it's not a slight against your profession, and I really appreciate everything that you've done.
We absolutely can take it.
But I have heard in the past 3 weeks, I'm going to be dead honest, in the past 3 weeks, I have heard current journalists talk trash about Celina and Jody. And I don't think that's on. Oh, they didn't handle it well. They should have known what the game was like. They're a problem too.
I probably didn't phrase my very first question as well as I could have, but I think certainly when I hear that what the controversies of what went down, a lot of it was, well, what did they expect? They're getting into politics and it's messy. That's kind of, I think we've already answered that question, unless you want to say something else to it. But I had one more question before we take questions that I wanted to put to everybody that's kind of related. When Leaf tweeted out this event, I got personal emails and texts about it. There was also some chatter on Twitter. Like, it's very much like, we're sick of hearing from these people. We don't want to hear from them anymore. And I'm so fascinated by that response, because I'm like dying. I want to hear everything you have to say all the time. There's political intrigue, there's drama here, there's real insights, there's experience. I want to know it all. But it's like you broke a rule and therefore you're kicked out. Or this idea of being kind of defined by speaking out, and that's going to follow you around forever. But just, can you speak to this, the backlash that sometimes follows you for even just kind of saying this, speaking out or going against the grain, I guess. And we'll start with Celina.
Start with Jody. You didn't start with Jody yet.
I know I did start with Jody last time.
Oh my God. So I'm tearing up like as you're talking about this, because my one hope is that the present might not be kind, but I hope history is kind to us. And I hope that for myself and Jody, but in particular Jane, like we didn't deserve it. We did not deserve it. We came there to do a job, and a job that I really loved. The people of Whitby, I love serving them. They are some like wild and crazy and incredible people who took a chance on someone who is like totally swears too much, drinks too much, and like says a lot. And they took a chance on me. And I told them that I would represent them authentically and honestly. And, we just didn't deserve that. Like, I wish somebody would just tell me, what did I do wrong? Please. What did Jody do wrong? What did Jane do wrong? Stand up for the same values and principles that any Canadian in any industry anywhere on the world would stand up for each other. We just came through a Me Too movement where you talk about believe her when she's harassed, believe her when she's bullied, believe her, and then to just believe her when it was convenient and leave her when it was not. No, that's not who we are. We deserve better than that. So in as much as it makes me sad, bring on the backlash. I wish you would bring it on, because what else are we supposed to do? Do you think you will bully us into silence? We've been through it. We've done it. So bring it on, because there's a generation of young people, and not just girls, gender fluid people, young boys, young girls, young people who need us to keep speaking up, to be the definition of how to break and bend the status quo, how to smash glass ceilings so we're no longer talking about them. Bring it on.
Jody, what's your thought about the, like, oh, she's just out, she just hates Justin Trudeau, or the backlash
Well,
surrounds you?
I mean, first of all, listening to Celina, everybody should listen to Celina when she speaks. Her voice matters, and what she did, and I would put a +1 if it was on Twitter, what you said about changing the reality of Parliament, both you, Robyn, and Lisa. Celina, you were responsible for changing so much and opening up so many eyes, and telling through your words and your story is incredibly important. And after we talked a bit about the backlash that came from this panel, I feel sorry for those people that seem to, just by virtue of the fact that we're not within that group or political party, and believe me, it comes from a certain group that's involved in a political party, that seem to just dislike us somehow if we're not a member of their their club, we seem to have to stop talking, that our voices simply don't matter anymore. And that's just ridiculous, and it's not true. And what I'll say to everyone, and I'm sure everybody on this panel gets lots of messages and emails and phone calls and people coming up to them. I certainly do. And the voices that I hear are just from Canadians right across the country that want change and want to hear diverse voices and want to have those voices actually engaged in meaningful public policy discussions that lead to legislation or policies that stand the test of time. So, I mean, where I might have a bad day and somebody like draws some racist trope about me or has me bound and gagged with that person that you mentioned standing over me, that might make me feel down. But for every message like that, there's tens and dozens of messages that are the exact opposite, that are supportive. And the messages that came out of this panel, and I'm so glad that Leaf did this panel and responded to some of them. This isn't about one person. This isn't about the Prime Minister. There are far more interesting subjects than talking about one individual. We're talking about transforming a culture of politics that has been driven by white men for too long and bringing other voices into the discussion. That's how if COVID has taught us anything, it's taught us that we're interdependent and interconnected, and the voices of marginalized individuals need to be included in discussions, and we need to change that culture. And it's not just within politics, but Canadians are leading the way, and I'm really heartened and empowered by that.
One more quick question, if we can answer really quick, and then we'll take a couple questions from the audience. And Lisa, I'll put it to you first. Magic wand, you can change anything. What could be done to make the political system more welcoming for people who break the traditional mold? And by traditional mold, I mean white men.
It's going to seem a little bit random, but more accountability of the leader to the caucus, because the leaders get to control it all. And what they say, it's a cult of personality, both conservative and liberal. It's not just one. And if you have the ability to push back against the leader in a meaningful way, where the leader may not be thinking that they're going to have their job for a long period of time, that gives power back to the people within the caucus. And I have come around to the fact that I think it's a good thing. They do that in England. They do that in Australia. You can remove the leader.
Can I make a quick point? I just want to articulate, in case there are any white men listening, this is not about all white men. This is the patriarchy and white supremacy hurts everyone. It's about changing the current system. Go ahead, Celina or Jody, which one of you wants to jump in?
By extension of Lisa's comments, I would say that that the one thing I've been obsessed with is, what is that one thing that you could change? And I'm actually looking to complete a doctorate on this, and it's empathy. And it's the intersection of why and when does empathy leave the room? Like, if we are supposed to be taking all of these stories and all of these ideas from people across this country and translating them into policy, how do we disengage from that and do egocentric things? How do we not hold ourselves to account to the people? And I think that there is a mind, body, spirit disconnect when you get there. And I don't think it's everybody either. I don't think it's everybody. I think that there's a few people that are in positions of power that have forgotten that this is about service. And so I would say that the empathetic courage to do what is right and to see people, to listen to people is one of the things that I would really consider investigating and changing.
Jody, magic wand, what can make the system better? Something that
Yeah,
could change.
I agree with what my pals have said. We need less partisanship. We need to eradicate blind loyalty to a leader. We need more independence. We need to be more cooperative. We need to work towards, as best we can, consensus-based decision making. While that's not going to always happen in politics, it has to happen on issues like climate change, on Indigenous reconciliation. And I talk about and Lisa might remember the sign in the cabinet room in center block, there was a sign on the wall that was carved and it talked about love and justice, you who are the rulers of the earth. And we need more love and we need more justice. And for me, that sign resonated every minute that I sat in that room about the responsibilities that we had as legislators, as ministers, but the responsibilities we have as citizens to ensure that we put love and justice at the center of everything that we do.
Amazing. Okay, I'm going to ask each of you one question and then we are to wrap it up. There's lots of good questions in the chat. This one I'll put to Lisa first. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Now
So
I'm sorry.
we have a question from someone in law school who wants to know if is the best path to making change through politics. Is it better to can you have meaningful impacts? I mean, obviously you can, but in other organizations, but is it worth pursuing politics if you want to make real change?
Yeah, it is. I'm going to tell you why. 2 reasons. One, you can make change while you're there if you work really hard and you build relationships. Jody made change, Celina made change, I made change. It can work. And number 2, politics can be an accelerant in your career for women specifically. You can move through layers that you would not have been able to move through had you taken a more traditional route and arrive at a leadership position earlier or younger than you would have anticipated. So, and there you can make change as well when you're in the private sector. So that's the experience. I agree with Celina. I was terrified after I lost that I was never going to find another job. And it's tough to be out there, but it can be an accelerant in your career.
Okay, this one's for Jody. Jody, there's quite a few questions about people who are concerned that getting into politics, the online harassment people face, the increase, the violence in general, especially that women of color face. How do you manage I'm interested in this myself, the online backlash or just backlash in general, the harassment that has come with being a high profile woman of color in politics?
Well, I mean, sometimes you have, worse days than others and you let it impact you, but I don't read Twitter. It's a bit of a cesspool out there. I don't read the comments. I like to use Twitter as a vehicle for delivering good messages and supporting people and other social media. But so don't read that stuff. It's always going to come, and surround yourself by people that share the same values and the same principles as you do. There are more good people than there are people that are out there trying to not identify themselves certainly and then slag you. But you need to have a good support system. And looking at all the 4 gals on the screen right now, I know that we will always be there for one another to be cheering people on that are putting themselves out there.
How do you not read the comments? How do you is it just like swear jar, put $1 in or something, or just force yourself not to look at it?
I used to do it, honestly, when I was exiting out and resigned as a minister, I did read some of those comments, but then they just got overwhelming. I mean, there are a lot of really positive ones, but the negative ones, it just is not good for your mental well-being. So that's why I don't do that. My husband and my friends do that, and then they tell me some of the more awful ones. And now it actually kind of makes me chuckle because I know where it comes from, and it's coming from the exact same people and the exact same journalists that have been negative towards me for their own obvious partisan reasons. And that's fine. I accept that there are those people in the world.
Okay, Celina, you get the last question. I'll just read it exactly as it's written. How do you keep motivated when you keep fighting the system in support of anti-racism and equity and keep facing the answer that there isn't enough time, enough money, enough resources? How do you reconcile wanting to give up with the fear that if you do, you won't be true to your core of wanting to advocate?
Oh my goodness. So one of my favorite essays was written by Clayton Christensen. He was a Harvard professor. It's called How Will You Measure Your Life? And in it, he says it is easier to stand by your values and principles 100% of the time than it is to stand with them 98% of the time. If you give in to the just this once based on a marginal cost analysis, you'll regret where you end up, and you have to draw a line in the sand and stay with it. And so I am motivated. I stand firm on my values and beliefs. So when I'm said, when it's like, okay, put your party above your principles. No, that is a direct contradiction to what I believe in, what my value system is. And if people have read my book, they've known that I wrote the book kind of upside down. I wrote it talking about all my hurts and my pains and my guilt and my shame. And I wrote it that way because I wanted people to know that I didn't sympathize with them when I advocate. I empathize. I know what that pain feels like. I know what hurt feels like. I know what it feels like to get left behind. I know what it feels like to really want something and not be able to achieve it. And so I'm motivated by the fact that there's work to do. But I'm also motivated by the fact that there are some really brave and incredible young people out there that are twice as smart, twice as brave, twice as sophisticated as I'll ever be in many lifetimes. And they feed my energy. So Jody said she was glass half full. I am glass half empty all the time. I am just like looking for the problems, right? And so they fill my cup. And I draw strength from them. So I keep motivated from them because I know that if I have the megaphone and people keep giving me this megaphone to speak, that I could make a way a little bit, open it up just a little bit, clear a little bit of that brush from the path to make their wonderful ideas come forward a little bit smoother. So the motivation goes back to some really incredible young people that I love and I want to keep them motivated. So I keep motivated through them.
Well, for a glasses half full person, that was a pretty full
Glass
glass
half empty.
wrap up. Jody and Celina and Lisa, this has just been such a lovely hour. And I really wish we had another hour. This could go on all night, but I think a lot to chew on here. I think some pretty good takeaways, which is nice, which I always like partisanship seems like blind partisanship, I think seems to be a big comment we heard over and over again, which again, I think my industry, we have some talking to do too. So we can keep this going. I don't know if someone from LEAF is going to jump back on here or if you want Lisa to take over.
Thank you to you, Robyn. You're fantastic. Thank you to you.
Thank you. It's really great.
I would like to hear Lisa's comedy routine though.
Me too.
I can stay.
No. Well, Robyn, I will tell you that. So a lot of people know my husband has early onset Alzheimer's, and I did a little bit of comedy around what it's like for him, which you would think is bizarre, but it did work. But nonetheless, I want to let people know that when Bruce was diagnosed, and as I share what we're going through, both Jody and Celina are there through DMs and through direct texts, supporting me and giving me love all the way. So thank you guys.
Friendship is okay. Pam, how's it going?
Robyn.
Yeah. Nothing. I'm just saying.
Robyn, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Celina, Jody, and Lisa for sharing your time and insights with us tonight. I think we're tremendously fortunate to have heard this conversation amongst such independent, strong, powerhouse women about the state of political culture in this country, as well as some of the dangers and realities of overt partisanship. You've left us with a lot to reflect on, I think, and more importantly, to act on. So for those who don't know me, I am Pam Rick. I am the Executive Director and General Counsel of the Women's Legal Education and Action Fund, or LEAF. I also want to thank everyone who has taken the time to join us and attend this panel gala this evening. Because you're here, you'll probably know that this gala is a flagship fundraising event for LEAF. So I'd like to take a few minutes just to highlight some of the work that LEAF has been doing over the past year and to tell you a bit about what's ahead.
none of which would be possible without your generous support. I think it will become clear as I tell you what we've been up to that LEAF is as active as ever, and that our intersectional feminist voice is needed more than ever on key legal and policy issues. The funds that we raise tonight help to ensure that LEAF can effectively advocate for gender equality throughout the country and at every level of government. This has been a year and a half, really, of resilience and growth for LEAF. We've seen a change in organizational leadership, both at the staff and the board level. It was a privilege to step into the role of executive director and general counsel in February of this year. Our small but mighty LEAF team of 8 people has worked almost entirely remotely since March of 2020. I remotely onboarded to join a dynamic and passionate team of people dedicated to advancing gender equality in Canada. I want to say how grateful I am, especially to Brea Hutchinson, who is LEAF's new Director of Operations, who has stepped into the role of acting executive director during my current parental leave. LEAF has been as active and as effective as ever in using litigation to advance women's equality and gender equality this year. We have seen our advocacy influence the Supreme Court's decision in Colucci, which was released in June. That decision revisits what legal tests courts need to apply when deciding whether to retroactively decrease a parent's child support obligation or to cancel arrears. On these issues, the Supreme Court unanimously adopted the legal framework that we proposed in our joint intervention with West Coast LEAF. This decision will make it easier for single mothers to receive the child support that they are owed. LEAF's voice is also being heard as an intervener in 3 important cases before the Supreme Court this fall. First, earlier this month, we intervened in Sullivan and Chan. And that case examines the defense of self-induced extreme intoxication under Canadian criminal law. The criminal code says that where a person is accused of certain violent offenses, including sexual assault, they are not allowed to use their own extreme intoxication as a defense. LEAF intervened in this case to highlight the need for courts to carefully balance women's equality rights against the rights of accused in criminal cases. Second, this month we also intervened in the case of AS. This is a constitutional challenge to the legal framework governing what happens when an accused person has a sexual assault complainant's private records, like photographs, text messages, or medical records, and wants to use them at trial. One of our panelists, who may have served in the role of Minister of Justice, familiar with this framework, LEAF has argued that the framework enhances the equality rights of complainants while respecting the accused's right to make full answer in defense, and that it should be upheld. Hearings with meaningful participation for complainants enhance access to justice and the equality, dignity, and privacy rights of complainants. Third, early next month, the Supreme Court will hear from us again in Kirkpatrick. That is a case that deals with the boundaries of consent to sexual activity under Canadian criminal law. Specifically, it raises the following question. If someone is asked to use a condom, but they do not comply, is the sexual activity considered consensual? LEAF will argue that no, it is not. There's even more litigation work on the horizon in 2022, and I'll give you 3 brief sneak peeks. LEAF will seek to intervene before the Supreme Court in Sharma. This is a case about the over-incarceration of Indigenous women in Canada, mandatory minimums, and the availability of conditional sentences. The Ontario Court of Appeal's decision in this case single-handedly implemented one of the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Canada is seeking to have that decision overturned. LEAF will be there to resist that effort. We will also seek LEAF to intervene in the constitutional challenge to Quebec's discriminatory Bill 21 before the Quebec Court of Appeal. We are pleased to be working jointly with La Fédération des Femmes du Québec on this joint intervention. Finally, we will seek LEAF to intervene in the constitutional challenge to New Brunswick's laws limiting access to abortion. That case is being argued before the New Brunswick Court of Queen's Bench. In the spirit of relentless advocacy for gender equality, LEAF will also be continuing its work with the Mass Casualty Commission in Nova Scotia. This is an independent public inquiry created to examine the April 2020 mass casualty event and to provide meaningful recommendations to help protect Canadians in the future. LEAF, Avalon Centre, and Wellness Within will be there to support the Commission's work and to ensure that its recommendations respond to the harms of gender-based violence in this case and more broadly. In addition to our extensive litigation and public inquiry work, LEAF has also been active in advancing feminist law reform over the course of the past year, including through two notable projects. First, our technology-facilitated violence project has brought together feminist lawyers and academics to research and propose legal responses to technology-facilitated violence against women and gender-diverse people. These proposed responses are informed by equality principles. The work of this project has been led by LEAF staff lawyer Roselle Kim. From hosting webinars to consulting with parliamentarians to the release of our groundbreaking report on technology-facilitated gender-based violence called Deplatforming Misogyny and authored by Cynthia Koo, LEAF has been relentless in centering the experiences of women and gender-diverse people in talking about how to tackle gender-based violence, particularly on social media platforms. A link to the Deplatforming Misogyny report, I believe, is going to be included in the chat, and I can let you know that the executive summary is available in both French and English. We recently also submitted a brief in response to the federal government's call for input on proposed legislation in this area. As the federal government promises to introduce legislation to regulate social media companies within the first 100 days of its new mandate, LEAF is ready and determined to continue advocating for equality-enhancing solutions to technology-facilitated violence. Our second major feminist law reform project has been our Basic Income Project. Led by LEAF staff lawyer C. Strauss, we have been studying the issue of basic income as an effective way to address gender equality. At the beginning of this month, we released two reports on this subject. The first one, Basic Income, Gender and Disability, is authored by Dr. Sally Kimpson. Our second report, Basic Income and the Care Economy, is authored by C. Strauss. These reports set out important recommendations for federal and provincial government action and legislative reform. This includes that the federal government should work with provinces and territories to implement both a basic income and a targeted basic income for people with disabilities, but only alongside other necessary policies and commitments. I encourage you to join us for our virtual launch event on October 28th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, we might be able to put that link in the chat, where C and Dr. Kimpson will be among those discussing this important work. Continuing our work at LEAF is crucial. During the pandemic, we have seen brought to the forefront of public discourse the systemic oppression of the most marginalized women, including Indigenous women, Black women, and trans women. There is so much to be done in partnership with and under the leadership of these communities to ensure that the promise of substantive equality is realized for all of us, not just for some of us. None of this work would be possible without the support of our donors and our funding partners. If you are able to, please consider supporting us today. You can make a donation on our website. Our link for the website should be put in the chat there. It's leaf.ca/donate, or by contacting Megan Cameron at m.cameron@leaf.ca. Thank you to everyone who attended this gala panel this evening for your engagement and your questions and for your support of LEAF. Thank you to the closed captioners and to the folks at Neoli for your technical assistance to make this panel a reality. Thank you to all the staff, especially Megan Cameron and Brea Hutchinson, and our board members at LEAF National for organizing this event. And finally, thank you again to all of our sponsors who support our work. Have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.